Greetings, warriors of wisdom, and welcome to another enlightening episode of Breakthrough to Better. This is Busy Babe, your unwavering companion in the journey of self-growth. Today, we're going to flip the script on a topic we've all wrestled with, mistakes. In our pursuit of perfection, we often denounce mistakes, seeing them as unwelcome setbacks or signs of failure. But what if I told you that these errors, these perceived missteps, are not roadblocks, but rather stepping stones to success? This episode is all about redefining mistakes, understanding their true value, and learning how they can be instrumental in our path to success and self-improvement. So, pioneers of perspective, are you ready to embrace your mishaps, see the worth in your missteps, and realize how mistakes are indeed worth millions? Let's embark on this enlightening journey together right here on Breakthrough to Better. P.S. We're doing a giveaway raffle every week for those that leave reviews and comments below. This week's giveaway is brought to you by Layered Jewelry. Affordable, stylish, quality pieces that let you express your unique style. This week's winner is getting a piece of their choice. All right, let's get into it. So, mistakes. I think mistakes get a really bad rap. Not just in like business and stuff like that, or like at a job, but also in life. I think we think mistakes are pretty much bad things. And they don't necessarily have to be something bad per se. A mistake is something that you do that you really didn't intend to do. But that's not to mean that it can't teach you something or that it isn't something that will work in your favor. So I was doing a little bit of research for this particular episode. I know I took the week off last week just to recharge a little bit, but while I was doing that, I was doing a little research for this episode. And because I really wanted to give some more really just concrete examples and background on when mistakes actually paid off. And I actually found a lot of good examples of, people in history or companies throughout history that made a mistake and it turned out to be the best thing. So I will read through some of them and just kind of add in some commentary here and there as well, because a lot of people don't know about these. And I think if you knew that some of these very successful things were actually mistakes in the beginning, you would be surprised. And you would also look at mistakes a little differently, I think. So before we get into the mindset of it all, I want to give you some examples of mistakes that turned into blessings, if you will. So the first, I remember right away, I thought of it right before, I wasn't even researching, but I couldn't remember who it was that actually made the mistake here. But if anybody knows the name Alexander Fleming, if that rings a bell, you might have learned about him in science class or maybe history class. And what he did was he discovered penicillin. If you're not familiar with penicillin, penicillin was a drug that helps people, it's an antibiotic basically, and it's helped countless lives of people who would have normally died from, infections and stuff like that. Now they are able to live because they have these antibiotics. And so the way that he discovered penicillin was by accident. So he was doing a mold, and it was contaminated, and it was in one of his petri dishes in the lab, I guess. And because of that contamination, it basically led to the development of antibiotics, which revolutionized medicine. And can you imagine your job is working in the lab and you make a mistake and that mistake ends up saving thousands of lives? I mean, normally when you hear about mistakes in a lab, you think, oh God, like what happened? Like, oh, is that why we have massive outbreaks of a disease or the zombie apocalypse or, what have you? Like, the first thing people think of when they think of, oh, we made a mistake in the lab is like horrible apocalyptic, you know, consequences. And for this guy, just to accidentally um, just to stumble upon, antibiotics because a mold was contaminated, um, is quite bizarre the longer you think about it. But at the same time, it's very encouraging to think that you could be making a mistake in that moment and it could work in not just your favor, but other people's favor for years and years and years and years. So I thought that was absolutely an amazing example of a mistake that turned into something that changed lives for the better. The next one, he might not be as famous, but what he did or what he produced is famous. So Spencer Silver, you may not recognize the name, but he is the scientist at 3M. He was attempting to develop a super strong adhesive, right? That was the goal, that was the end point, that's what he intended to do. But instead, he accidentally created a low-tack, reusable, pressure-sensitive adhesive, or what we know as Post-it notes. And I think that's actually really funny because this guy went into the lab and he had one job, and his one job was, I need to create a super strong adhesive. I don't know why he needed to create it. Maybe like someone came to 3M and was like, hey, we need you to create something that's super sticky and like, will make things stick together forever, and that was his one job. And instead, he accidentally created something that was low tack, meaning like you could stick it on something, but you could rip it right off if you wanted to. Very easy to remove, which is the complete and total opposite of the strong adhesive when you think about it. So he didn't just not do his one job, he did the opposite of his one job, which I think is really funny when you look back on it. But think of all the applications that we have for Post-it notes. Like, Post-it notes became such a huge success and such a huge like phenomenon of culture that even on our computers we have these this app called, if you're on a Mac, it's called Notes, and it's literally in the shape of a sticky note, and you can leave them like on your desktop for reminders. So like, even though it's not even the sticky part, like just the idea of a Post-it note still lives on in the digital world. And to think this scientist guy went into the lab with one job and he did the complete opposite, and that changed the course of, culture forever. It's pretty cool. Like, think about all the times that you had one job to do at work, and maybe you're struggling at that. But in that journey of trying to do that one job, you find another way to do something else that is just as impactful. And I think that's really encouraging. The next example that I found was Percy Spencer. And I don't recognize this name at all, but he created the microwave oven. Or at least he led to the development of the microwave oven. And if you went to college, you have this guy to thank for every meal probably you've ever made in college, because microwave life, right? But maybe that's more telling of my college experience. But he was an engineer, and he accidentally discovered microwave cooking. So when a radar magnetron was working with melted a candy bar in his pocket. So basically, he put this, I guess, magnetron and was working with it, right? And there was a candy bar in his pocket, and it melted. And I guess for some reason he didn't think like, oh, I wonder why this candy bar melted. Maybe it was too warm in there. No, he somehow realized that this radar magnetron was what caused that candy bar to melt. And that led to the development of the microwave oven. And that's pretty cool because think about it. Like, if he didn't have that candy bar in his pocket, would he have ever found that out? It's kind of mind blowing about all of these things in life that happen for a reason, and they're so small and so innocuous, but they make such a big difference. And I just think the same goes for mistakes, that they can seem so small at the time, but they can mean so much in a good way. Um, and then there's Coca-Cola. I mean, I think we all know Coca-Cola. Coke is everywhere. But what happened there was that it was originally intended as a patent medicine. Yes, Coke was supposed to be a medicine, and it was created by John Pemberton. So the first batch was made by accident when a store clerk mixed it with a carbonated water instead of plain water. Bizarre. And to think, if that guy didn't make the mistake, right, didn't choose that carbonated water and instead did what he was supposed to do and put it in plain water, we would not have Coke. Not that Coke is, like for the better of society or anything like that, but just think about how big of a success it was, right? Like, it's still around to this day. It's gone through a lot of different iterations. But the fact that it was intended to do something else and ended up doing something entirely different than what it was intended for happens all the time, especially with medicines. There are a lot of medicines that were intended to treat other things, and they end up being used to treat or at least to help with symptoms of other diseases. And it's kind of crazy because you're like, well, I didn't mean for this to be used for this, but it just ended up being used for that and changing lives. So Coke is one of those stories where, hey, someone made a mistake and it ended up raking in probably at this point billions of dollars and giving people jobs and creating its own world and economy. And, it's crazy. But then also, this one was one of my favorite ones because I just remember playing with them so much. If you remember the Slinky, you're probably a 90s kid or an 80s kid, whatever, doesn't matter. But if you grew up with Slinkies, you just have memories of them just, like going down the stairs and doing their thing, but also always getting tangled, and it was the worst. But anyway, that's besides the point. So this engineer, Richard James, right? He was developing springs that could support and stabilize sensitive equipment on ships, which is not fun at all. Like, there's nothing fun in that sentence. And yet it turned out to be a toy. So when one of the springs fell and started walking, right, the potential for a toy was recognized, and it was leading to the creation of the Slinky. And I just thought, when I read that, like, wow. Can you imagine going to work, trying to put something together to help with, stabilizing equipment on ships, which is, like whatever. And then you end up creating a toy for fun and enjoyment and for kids, and just creating a phenomenon, a cultural phenomenon that still gets talked about to this day. Like, it's just bizarre. Like, every single time I read one of these, I'm just like blown away by the ability for our mistakes to mean something. Not even for the negative, but for the positive. And I think that's even more mind blowing, is that mistakes don't have to be negative, right? And then there's two more. So the next one is Teflon. So if you know the company DuPont, I went to the University of Delaware, and DuPont was very big down there. Actually, I think we toured one of their facilities and we got to see things that were made out of Teflon, and just, the applications of Teflon itself, which is numerous and also very, very helpful in many different industries. But this guy ranked Ray Plunkett, right? He was attempting to create a new refrigerant, and he accidentally discovered, and I'm going to say it, and please don't laugh at me for trying to attempt to say this, but polytetrafluoroethylene. I think I nailed it. But PTFE for short, right? It's a substance with extraordinary non-stick properties, which was later branded as Teflon. And again, he was going into work trying to make something else, and he accidentally discovered something else along the way. And any other moment in time that you're at work and you don't do what you're supposed to do, you don't get the goal you're supposed to get, it would be a mistake. But this, you can't even say it's a mistake. It's a discovery. And that's really all mistakes are discoveries. So okay, so the last one is kind of funny to me. I've heard a little bit of this in passing throughout the years, but this one is kind of bizarre and out there. So Pfizer. If you know Pfizer, you know the Pfizer juice or whatever you want to call it. They made the vaccines, right? Or at least one form of the vaccine, and they also brought Viagra to the market. And if you know how Viagra works, it helps men do stuff. Anyway, so you can look it up yourself. But it was initially developed as a treatment for hypertension and angina pectoris, if you want to get scientific. But its notable side effect was as a treatment for erectile dysfunction, and it was discovered accidentally during clinical trials. Now, I don't know about you, but whenever I see a commercial for Viagra, I do not hear anything about how it treats hypertension or angina pectoris. All I hear is them talk about how it treats ED. And it's like I was saying before, there are many medications that they're being developed for another disease or another thing, and they ended up stumbling upon a different treatment for a different dysfunction or disease. And it's crazy. Like, think about all of the medicines that right now are being developed, and think about all the clinical trials that are going on right now, and all of the additional side effects, positive side effects that are being found. Imagine if someone is creating a drug out there somewhere that's supposed to cure hiccups. I don't know. I'm just going to come up with a random thing, right? Hiccups, right? And in that trial, they found that giving people this drug, they cured a type of cancer. Think how insanely positive that would be. Think about the implications of having a drug that could do that. All because someone decided to go after something and miss. Because they didn't reach their goal. Because something didn't work out. Because they failed to do what they came to do. The rest of the world benefits. And it just completely underscores the serendipitous nature of many scientific and commercial breakthroughs, and where unintended results can lead to major advancements of entirely new products. And I know all of these examples were very much, commercial and medicine and science-based, but the same is true in everyday life. We can make mistakes all day long. And that doesn't mean that all of them are bad. It doesn't mean that you're bad for making mistakes. It doesn't mean that we are doomed because we've made a mistake. And it doesn't mean that our life ends when we make a mistake. Take it from a recovering perfectionist. I hate mistakes, making mistakes. I always feared making mistakes. I feared failure, and failure to me was making a mistake. And to hear that all of these separate accidents, mistakes, failures can result in something so positive and so impactful and for the good of everybody else makes me feel like mistakes are meant to happen. And when you hear the word mistake, it's almost as if you are saying, this wasn't supposed to happen. But I would argue that mistakes are supposed to happen. Mistakes are supposed to happen for you to learn, for you to grow, for things to be discovered, for things to advance. Can you imagine how life would not progress if all we did was succeed? If all we did turned to gold? If everything we did that we set out to do, we did, and nothing went wrong? Think about all the times that you set out to do something that you wanted. And because you didn't get what you want, you got what you needed. And I think that that is the catch. That we can want something so bad, but it's not necessarily what we need. It doesn't necessarily move us forward. It doesn't necessarily grow us. It doesn't necessarily benefit anyone else but ourselves. In fact, it might detriment someone else. And there's that song, if you try sometimes, you get what you need. You can't always get what you want. And we label these things as mistakes because we're not getting what we want. But if we look outside of what we want and we look at what we need, I bet you those quote unquote mistakes actually brought you closer to what you needed. Whether you needed to learn a new lesson, whether you needed to see something from a different perspective, whether you needed to have something revealed to you, whatever it is, mistakes are meant to happen. And redefining that word mistake is super, super important. Because I will get very personal with you right now. I always viewed myself as a mistake. I was adopted. And after I found that out, I thought, mistake. Not intended to happen. But here's the thing. Just because I may have not been intended to happen doesn't mean that I'm a negative outcome. It doesn't mean that I am wrong. It doesn't mean that I'm not needed. And the same goes for every mistake that you make in life. Mistakes are discoveries. Mistakes are stepping stones. And if we just look outside of ourselves and what we want, I bet you that we'll find what we need in those mistakes. So I just wanted to share that with you guys today. I really hope that someone got something from that. That's all for today's episode of Breakthrough to Better, guys. I hope you found insights and inspiration from this discussion. And as we continue exploring life's lessons and turning them into stepping stones for personal growth, if you'd enjoyed this episode, please spread the love, share it on your social media channels. Let's inspire others also to strive for their betterment. Be sure to tag us and use the hashtag Breakthrough to Better. Every share, every comment, every review helps us reach more people and make a wider impact. So until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and remember, when you get better, the world gets better. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you next week.